Hey everybody, I come to you today, unfortunately not previewing nor reviewing an AFC Championship game, nor discussing the Bills' first Super Bowl appearance in over 30 years. Today I come to you to talk about the Bills firing head coach Sean McDermott and hiring Joe Brady as his replacement. I would be remiss, however, if I didn't at least talk about the circumstances that led to this decision. Of course, that being the divisional round game against the Denver Broncos. And my primary takeaway from that is that Denver was begging to be beat. Denver was showing you the entire game that they really don't know how to get this home. Not the entire game, but throughout the end of it. They don't know how to get this home. They don't know how to close this game out. I felt this way during week 6 in the Atlanta game. However, the Bills really didn't play well for almost that entire game. And for the Denver game, they didn't play well for pockets of it, but it was really mostly about the turnovers and the Bills making mistakes. And that's what ultimately led to their loss. They just kept tripping over themselves. And sure, there were some controversial calls there. Yeah, definitely. But the truth, the hard truth, the tough pill to swallow is that you don't get to complain about the refs, really, when you had 5 turnovers. It's the truth. But if you want to talk about it, because I feel like we need to talk about it, or the things that went down, the questionable calls in question. It's a little redundant. But these controversial calls are certainly controversial. One, I'm going to write off right away. I think Tre'Davious White getting called for pass interference was earned. I didn't love it. I've seen it let go before, but I do think it was earned. The Taron Johnson one, I despised. I think that was just terrible. I think the crowd kind of made that call. And it's just unfortunate that we went this entire game with no defensive pass interference penalties, and then they just call 2 in the span of, 2 or 3 plays even? Just odd. Doesn't mean they shouldn't enforce the rules. Let me just say that. I'm a fan of, or a proponent, I should say, of enforcing the rules, no matter what the situation. That's why I think Tre'Davious White's was earned. Taron Johnson's was not. That was ridiculous. And then, of course, the big one, the Brandon Cooks play, which I will tell you as I was watching it live, I should say, I thought it was an interception. I don't know how you could not. You do think it's landing in Brandon Cooks' arms, but as they roll over and you go through this roller coaster of emotions as the Broncos guy, McMillan, comes away with it, and you're like, oh, it's an interception. That sucks. Because you're on this high thinking you're going to win the game when it lands in Cooks' arms and you think he's got it because you don't see the ball on the ground. But then the Denver guy rolls over with the ball, and at first I'm just like, oh, it's an interception. My immediate thought was, well, arm punt, because it was 3rd and I think it was like 3rd and 7 at the time, so the Bills would have punted anyway, even if that were incomplete. But they would have won the game if it were complete. And on second watch, I do think it was. I was really unaware of the public reaction at the time because I try not to go on Twitter during the games, during the road games at least, because I'm at all the home games. But during the road games, if you are watching on YouTube TV or Paramount or whatever, I'm sure that you know, that if you're scrolling Twitter live while the game is on, something will get spoiled for you. The reporters, the field reporters and whatnot at the game will have the play tweeted out and on the feed before it happens on your TV. So I try to avoid that. I do go there sometimes when I'm looking for review decisions. I didn't do it in this case because I was staring, I was staring at my phone that was going nuts, so I wasn't on, I know that's kind of contradictory. I was on the phone because people are texting me like, I think he caught this, like 10 friends all at once, And upon looking at the reviews, I thought so too. But, I mean, what's the point in the referee going under the hood if New York had already made their decision? It's really, if he goes under the hood, all he's going to do is talk to New York, and New York has already told Sean McDermott that they've confirmed the call on the field. That might be your definition of home cooking a little bit. It's like, the call on the field is an interception. We're in Denver. We're sticking with the call on the field. In Buffalo, maybe it works the other way around. We don't know. That's a little bit of, that's a hypothetical situation, of course, and I don't, like I said, definitively know that that would be the case, but I'm curious. I'm certainly curious. Anyway, I go back to what I said at the beginning of this. You don't get to complain about the officiating when you turn the ball over 5 times. That's the hard truth. I come back to that again. It's just the hard truth. And then you hear the report after the game where, well, you hear Sean McDermott's post-game presser where he is convinced that Brandon Cooks caught the ball, and, you know, you feel for him. You're like, I'm standing up for Buffalo, damn it, he says. And you're like, yeah, coach, you know, go get him. Then you hear that he called the Buffalo News after the game from the team plane. He called Jay Skursky, a Buffalo News reporter, and to talk more about it. And at that point, I was like, oh boy, it feels like the writing is on the wall here. Like, is he going to get fired? Because this is a little bit of unhinged behavior, something that we haven't seen from him before. And I know that it's an emotional moment for sure. Like, your season just ended. Your hearts have just been ripped out. Your quarterback is crying at the podium. Your left tackle is crying, answering questions about your quarterback. Your receiver, Brandon Cooks, is crying, answering questions about that play. And you're the head coach. You feel the need to stand up for your guys. You should be standing up for your guys. I appreciate that. And I think that's, well, before I say this, I guess I'm going to say, but it's a pretty odd thing to do. Pretty kind of unprecedented thing for a head coach to do. And I think he might have known in that moment what was in his future, immediate future. Because I think he might have had an inclination that he was going to be fired. And a day or two later, he was. Now, let me just say how much I appreciate Sean McDermott. The professionalism that he brought to the organization, the stability that he brought to the organization, and competence. However, I think what fans get confused with sometimes is conflating competence with excellence. You shouldn't just settle with Sean McDermott. It sounds mean, and I really don't mean for it to sound, besmirching or anything like that. You shouldn't just settle for what you have because you're afraid of what you had before, because you remember how bad it was then. It doesn't mean it can't get better. Because we had Rex Ryan and Chan Gailey and Doug Marrone quitting, and Dick Duran and whoever. Yes, the Bills were disorganized, disheveled. Like I said, he brought confidence, stability, reputation, professionalism. He brought all those things. He elevated the organization. I will forever appreciate him for that. What an easy guy to root for. Wherever he goes, unless it's, silver helmets and navy blue jerseys, or, maybe an aqua-related mammal on his lapel here, or, red jerseys. Unless it's one of those, I think I'll have a pretty easy time rooting for him. And regardless, I want him back to lead the charge. I look forward to that one day. Might be too soon to do it next year. Even though it looks like he's going to take the year off from coaching, there might just not be an available position for him. But I look forward to that. I mean, I've mentioned on this channel before, Tyrod Taylor's like the number one guy I look forward to, but it might be neck and neck with Sean McDermott. I'm very eager to see him again. He has respect. He has my respect. Not that that even matters to him, okay? But he has my respect forever. Having said all that, what I said before, it's okay that the Bills decided to move on. It truly is. I know that a lot of fans are looking at Brandon Beane with fire in their eyes. They can't believe that Brandon Beane wasn't fired and Sean McDermott was. A lot of fans were kind of reconciling it, like, yeah, I get the McDermott firing, but for you to leave Brandon Beane in position and really elevate his role a little bit, maybe even if it's only like a paper move to be, football ops president or something like that, like that's infuriating. I didn't find it infuriating, but some fans did find it infuriating. And I think it's because there's some recency bias there. You're mad at Brandon Beane for what the roster is this year. And for past draft failures, such as Kyer Elam, Cody Ford, stuff like that. Yes, I mean, we can list them all. I understand it, okay? He has taken some really good swings. The Josh Allen thing, of course, that's why he still has his job. The Diggs trade was smart at the time, and it really helped elevate Josh. Signing guys like John Brown and Cole Beasley just moved this team to the next level. Elevated the quarterback, and thus the franchise moving forward towards the future. The ripples between him and McDermott became a little bit more apparent this year. Is that a right word? Ripples, or the rift? Yeah, that's probably a better word for it. The wrinkles, the rift. I don't know what I was trying to say there, but rift, I think, is the best word for it. Between he and McDermott started becoming a little bit apparent this year, especially with, I would say, the Darius Slay thing. When Darius Slay was claimed and the Bills lost Jamarcus Ingram and Darius Slay didn't show up, Coach McDermott was like, yeah, you have to ask Brandon about that. I'm not going to answer any more questions about Darius Slay. And you're like, you're doing this? You're kind of like touching your chin, scratching your head a little bit. Like, they don't sound like two guys who are sort of on the same page about this. And that's where this word alignment that the Bills have just kind of beaten into us over the past week came from. And I think that's where it shows. That's where it stems from. A situation like that. Not that, solely that incident, but that's part of it. I think I said all that because not to necessarily defend Brandon Beane. He has admitted, he's like, there's some things I could do better. Yeah, he's like, I know, and I'm going to just continue making it my number one priority to make the Buffalo Bills a Super Bowl contender and to elevate this roster and whatnot. Having said that, Brandon Beane drafted Josh Allen. He helped build out the O-line, with the exception of Deion Dawkins. But David Edwards was a great find. Connor McGovern's a great free agent find. Osiris Torrance is pretty good. Spencer Brown is pretty good. He drafted James Cook. He's got you that. He's drafted Dalton Kincaid, who's pretty good when he's in the lineup. Made a great touchdown catch against Denver. Maybe the best touchdown catch, maybe the best catch of his entire career to this point, with a torn PCL. Very impressive. I know the receiver thing, okay? I know the, Dane Jackson's in the game over what would have been Jamarcus Ingram and giving up this touchdown that allows Denver to take the lead in the game. But if you're Beane, you have to think like, man, I have given you this. You got to make, this is not the right euphemism for this, but like, I'm giving you lemons, make lemonade. And I know that's wrong, because usually what people are saying, like, when life gives you lemons, like, that means like when it gives you like obstacles, make lemonade, that type of thing. I mean it in the sense that Brandon Beane gave him the pieces. He gave him the important pieces on offense, especially. Not necessarily wide receiver, I get. But like, Sean McDermott's background is defense. And I think I have good reason, I think, to assume that the defense was maybe built in McDermott's image. Like, you look at guys like Poona Ford and Tim Settle, that like, Poona Ford's good for the Rams. Tim Settle was pretty good for the Texans this year. Joey Bosa has been very good throughout his career for the Chargers, and like, he's rotating with AJ Epinesa in the playoff game, and Poona Ford can't get on the field for the Bills, and Tim Settle is just a one and done for the Bills. And you're going to go after me publicly for Jamarcus Ingram? I don't know. I guess I really don't. I'm lobbing that out to you, to you, the viewer, because I want you to just sort of think about that kind of thing. Because I think when the firing was announced, it was probably the most shocking result of the four things that could have happened between the two of them. I think the least shocking thing that could have happened was they keep both. Just maintain status quo. I have a new stadium. I have a successful franchise. Let's just maintain the status quo and get another kick at the can here. That's a little bit surprising. Would be Bean, I think, being fired. This is at the time, again, would have been Bean being fired and McDermott staying on. The wow, that's very surprising, is if both got fired. But the most surprising thing, again, at the time, would have been McDermott getting fired and Bean staying on. But again, I talked about this just a few minutes ago. I think that's like a little bit of recency bias. Bean has given this team the tools. He has put the roster. The roster's been good enough, guys. Think about it. They've been good enough. They were good enough to beat the Broncos on a couple Saturdays ago. They were good enough to do it. They just turn the ball over constantly. And it's one thing if you're constantly having this failure moment against Kansas City, and this is just one team, one ghost that you can't put behind you. You can't get out of your closet. But now it's the Denver Broncos. And now it's Drake May and the New England Patriots are in the Super Bowl. How could you not watch the AFC Championship game and feel sort of justified if you're Terry Pagula and Brandon Beane? Because you have to watch this and be like, we would have beat both these teams. I know we would have beat both these teams. I felt confident watching it. We wouldn't have played Denver. Of course, we would have played New England. But you're watching Denver just trip all over themselves with their backup quarterback, granted. And then you're watching New England just basically unable to move the ball, scoring their only touchdown off of just a Jarrett Stidham, holy crap, what are you doing moment. And then just clinging the rest of the game, just holding on, like daring Denver to score. We allowed 27 points to that team, technically 33. I'm saying 27 because Josh Allen essentially gave, with fumbles, gave Denver 6 points, 2 field goals. And the defense did a nice job there on the second one. The first one, they had no choice. It was just an immediate field goal after the halftime fumble. But the second one, the defense did a nice job in the red zone to stop Denver. And the defense did a nice job the entire second half until it mattered. And if you think about this in retrospect, we should have maybe seen this as like the rule or the sign, so to speak, that was going to be with Sean McDermott as the head coach of the Bills. Houston Texans game. This is obviously going back to January of 2020, pre-pandemic, the 2019 season. Houston Texans game, the Bills are in the wild card there, and they were up 16-0 in the second half and lost in overtime. In 2021, that was the AFC Championship game against the Chiefs, and they got their doors blown off pretty much. They were competitive for the first quarter and a half, and then couldn't stop a nosebleed. The next year was 13 seconds, which in my opinion is maybe the most fireable offense ever. I think there's a real case to be made that you could have fired Sean McDermott there, maybe even promoted Brian Daboll then. The Bills are doing that now with Joe Brady. They could have, a couple years ago, promoted Brian Daboll. I don't know where the Bills would be had they done that, butterfly effect this thing. But, if 13 seconds isn't fireable, what is? Apparently this. Okay, but I just mean looking back on it. The next year was Denver, or not Denver, Cincinnati, the home game against the Bengals, where it felt over within the first 5 minutes. If you were there, and I was, it's 14-0. I think Jamar Chase had 2 touchdowns in the first 5 minutes of the game, it felt like. And you just knew it was going to be uphill battle for the Bills all day, and they could never catch up. The next year, you finally get the home game against Kansas City. You get it. You get the game you ask for. You lose. You miss a field goal, you lose. They give you a turnover. They fumble out of the end zone, Kansas City. They fumble the ball out of the back of the end zone. They take points off the board for them, and give the ball back to you. Just a crucial mistake. Can't make them pay for it. Last year in Kansas City, again, AFC Championship. Can't get the job done again. Now it's Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos. Sorry, man. We're working backwards here. I get it. I get it. I get it. I've talked for 20 minutes to tell you that I get it. And that regardless of whether or not I get it, I appreciate Sean McDermott for everything he brought to the organization. Really, I do. I would love to shake his hand. I would love to sit down with him and talk to him about football, life, anything. True story. I was unemployed probably 6 years ago or so. I don't want to say unemployed. I had a part-time job, but I was looking for full-time work. And I didn't really know what I wanted to accomplish with this, admittedly, but I wrote him personally a letter. I hand wrote it. I hand wrote him a letter, and I was like, you know, I don't know how I can help you, but I know I can help you because this is my favorite thing. The Buffalo Bills are my favorite thing. Let me help you in any way I can. I don't know what I wanted out of it, but I was like, I felt motivated in that however many hours it took me to write that out, to think about it and write it out. And I mailed it to him directly at the stadium, and he wrote back. He took the time to write back. It was typed out, but he hand signed it and was like, we don't have any positions on our coaching staff available right now. And I didn't really want to be a coach, I guess, but maybe I could have worded that a little bit better in the letter I wrote to him. But he wrote back, and he was like, if you want me to forward your resume to somebody in the organization, I'll do that for you. And I was just so impressed. Guy's got a fan for life in me. That doesn't mean that I necessarily think he's the best option moving forward for my football team, but I really appreciate him. I really do. And you see the reaction from the players on Instagram. They're like, wow, they were blown away. Leader of men is the number one thing I think that people are saying or that former players are saying. But you do see a couple like, I don't know, I'm just going to bring this up, like Jerry Hughes. You see Jerry Hughes? Jerry Hughes clearly still holds a vendetta against him for 13 seconds. I will say that. But, moving on, like I said, he's got a fan for life. I would love to see him come back and lead the charge. And, I hope you guys kind of feel the same way about him too, because I do think that while it was time, I do think it was time. How much I appreciate him. I don't know how many more ways I can say it. So let's move on. The Bills have fired their head coach, Sean McDermott, and we're told it's going to be an open search, which is a little bit odd in retrospect, considering the fact that they ended up just hiring from within and going with Joe Brady. But they did interview candidates such as Phillip Rivers, Davis Webb, Nate Scheelhaase, or however that's pronounced. Brian Dable. They brought Brian Dable back and talked to him. There's like 9. Lou Anarumo was in there. Anthony Weaver, sure. I'm not saying they didn't do their due diligence, but it's a little bit odd that they called it an open search and like a long process when, in about a week's time, even though they've interviewed 9 people and had, probably in-depth, intense conversations with 9 people, they just went with what they knew, and they didn't take all these necessarily outside perspectives and apply them or take a swing, and get risky with it. They went with Joe Brady, and that's fine. Honestly, fine. I don't know what the better option was. I think Clint Kubiak might be some people's favorite options. Grant Udinski, I should have mentioned, was an option that people seem to like. You have to remember that you're trusting the end, essentially, the end of Allen's prime. Scary to think about. But the end of Allen's prime with this next head coach. So you need to get it right. Udinski's a swing, for sure. I mean, maybe you want to get crazy with it and get super risky and gamble. Would have been a swing, for sure. But I think they just went with Joe Brady because think about it. I mean, they've been number 1 in offense and EPA and points scored since he's been the OC, and a lot of that might be Allen. That's the truth. And, I'm coming back to this right now just because I don't know why. I don't know why I'm coming back to this right now, because it might be applicable to Joe Brady too, that Allen might be covering up some of his flaws as a play caller. But I think Allen definitely covered up some of Sean McDermott's flaws as a head coach. And maybe we're going to find out. I think that's what we're going to find out maybe with Joe Brady. Or maybe Joe Brady's not even the best example for this because he was here. He was, Terry Pagula talked about we hit the proverbial playoff wall. Yeah, Joe Brady's been part of that for a couple of years now. But it really hasn't been offensive struggle after offensive struggle. I mean, they scored 30 points in Denver. They scored 29 in Kansas City the year before that. And then I think, 24 at home against Kansas City the year before that. In his steads, they've just allowed 27, 32, 33. Defense has to be better. Curious what they do with defense. Maybe they go with Jim Leonard. Maybe they go with, like a Raheem Morris or something like that. Somebody who has head coaching experience that they think could be valuable on the staff. They did hire Pete Carmichael, who's just been a Sean Payton guy for over 20 years, to be the offensive coordinator. And that's, I don't know, I'm encouraged. They ran a lot of play action with the Saints and with the Broncos as well, and they were a little bit more pass heavy, and I think some fans kind of want that. Anyway, sorry, I feel like I'm jumping around a little bit here, because I kind of want to go back to the press conference briefly here, because I mentioned this earlier. Terry Pegula said that it was the proverbial playoff wall that we couldn't get over. That's all he really needed to say. I think a lot of fans looked at that press conference like it was sloppily done because of the Keon Coleman thing and because of Mr. Pegula like interjecting at times, and it almost seemed like they weren't arguing face to face, but like that Bean was kind of arguing Terry Pegula's points, Mr. Pegula's points, like, and they were kind of going back and forth and telling you different things. And I understand that. I understand that opinion of it. I think that is maybe justified in a way. Because, like I said, I think all Terry Pegula had to say is proverbial playoff wall. That's it. That's why we did this. That's why we're here. That's the truth. It's been, he's been the coach, McDermott, for 9 years now. It's 8 years of Josh Allen, 7 years of playoff losses, and 0 Super Bowl appearances. So, yeah, proverbial playoff wall, yes, of course. But the Bills also haven't had that press conference since 2017, in almost 10 years, 9 years for sure, So anybody that's like, oh, man, this felt like the drought, that's unhinged. Stop. Just stop. That's a totally unreasonable reaction. It feels like a drought. So silly. They're searching for their first coach since the drought. This is the only coach they've had since the drought. So you're going to be like, this feels like the drought. No. Doesn't. Absurd take. Anyway, Joe Brady's the head coach. I felt so organized as I was talking about Sean McDermott, and I feel a little discombobulated since I started talking about Joe Brady. I understand the skepticism. I think it's the toughest sell to fans to kind of just like almost scapegoat Sean McDermott in a way. Like their bet, so to speak, is that McDermott was the issue. The reason we couldn't get over this hump is because of him. And that's what a head coach is really about, sort of, is situational football. They all know football to varying degrees. But being a head coach is about situations. And the Bills just didn't rise to the situation in any of the last 7 years in the playoffs. They had leads. They couldn't hold on to them. They had advantages. They couldn't hold on to them. They had weird falling outs with special teams coordinators and with guys like Leslie Frazier, who's in the Super Bowl now. Being a head coach is about the situations. So I'm eager to see what Joe Brady can do with that, because I thought he came across as genuine in his press conference, and he showed some humility. He was genuine, kind of ties in with believable. He came across as knowledgeable, as personable, but like these are all things that can wear out over time. Humility can wear out over time. I can only take so much of like, man, this is on me. This is my fault. I got to put these guys in a better position. We as fans can only take so much of that. You can talk ball all you want, but I need to see the results. You can come across as genuine and believable, but if your on the field results are contradicting that, that's where it becomes a problem. Anyway, I got to stop talking. Do people listen to 30-minute podcasts anymore? I mean, I look for the short ones personally. I look for the 15 or 20-minute ones and just kind of go off that way. But if you came this far in the video, man, do I really appreciate you. And please hit me up on Twitter. My Twitter handle and YouTube username are the same. or hit me up in the comments. Happy to talk about this more with you. But it might be a while before you guys hear from me again. It really might. Maybe we'll talk again at the draft. Sometimes I just need to detox a little bit from Bills football. I hope that you can appreciate that as well. But again, thank you for coming this far in the video. Thank you for a fun year on the YouTube, on Twitter /X, and all the interactions. I appreciate each and every one of you. Enjoy the rest of your winter. Enjoy your spring. But as always, above all else, go Bills.